can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Mike Begg, AMZ Advisors. And Mike, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. You know, since this is one of the top agency series, it's kind of also e-commerce series because that's Mike's expertise. Some of the top agencies series I've had Todd Tasky on. He kind of bridges agencies with private equity. He's got the Second Bite podcast. So actually, when the agencies he helps sell, sometimes make more on the second bite than they do on the first when the private equity sells on the next go around. So it's really interesting to hear about valuations of agencies and in that world. Also had Jason Swank on, who built up an 8-figure agency, sold it, and he's got a group for agency owners, but he also has been buying up agencies and he's grown very quickly doing that. So he talks about, again, valuation of agencies, what they're doing when they're buying things up. And also Adi Clevitt was one of my favorite ones too, Mike, which we geeked out on processes and systems. And she actually has a done for you service that does SOPs. So we kind of geeked out on productivity softwares. She was giving her suggestions. I was giving mine. And because if I can be a little more productive each day, or my team can, I'm all for it. So check out that on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, accountability, and the full execution production. You know, Mike, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy. So the company just shows up and talks, and then we do everything else. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. I love, introducing my guests too, Mike. We were just chatting before we hit record. Like, anyone in my network for Mike now is his network. And, hopefully I'll introduce him to Jeff Cohen. Shout out to Jeff at Amazon, who does amazing things there. But Jeff works, he's been in the e-commerce space for many, many years too. So I'm excited to introduce Mike Begg. He's an entrepreneur, expert in e-commerce and digital marketing. Mike co-founded AMZ Advisors with his two partners in 2015. They've generated over $500 million in sales for their clients. Mike and the AMZ team also operate AMZ Courses, which educates Amazon sellers on how to maximize sales on the platform. And they have Go Advance, which is the, it's a Spanish word for advance. So don't mistake it. It's Go AVANCE, Advance. They help brands expand in Latin America. I'm really excited for you to share that service, Mike, because I think there's a huge need, and people are going to go crazy over it. And they've grown to over 60 staff in over 8 countries at this point. So, Mike, thanks for joining me.
Jeremy, thank you for having me. That was one heck of an intro. I really appreciate it. But I'm really excited to be here today and tell you all about these things that I'm working on and hopefully bring some value to your audience.
We're going to talk, kind of how you went from umbrellas to what you're doing today, right? Yeah. Who knew you'd start off with umbrellas and this is where it lands you? But let's start with, AMZ Advisors and just tell people a little bit about what you do. And from the agency standpoint, we'll get into, kind of how your services evolved from the beginning. But tell people what you do at AMZ Advisors?
So the main thing that we do is we work with brands that are looking to go from 1 million a year on the Amazon platform to 10 million or more. We do everything from the marketing strategy, the advertising management, the brand positioning on the platform, pretty much everything they need to make that a possibility. And we essentially make it seamless for them. We have an entire team that handles everything, and we just need to communicate with them on certain aspects of the marketing and make it happen. So
You're just waiting to hit this billion mark. So I'm looking, if you're watching or if you're listening to it only, there is a video piece of this, and we're looking at amzadvisors.com right now. And, I can see this, you're just waiting for that to hit the 1 billion mark, I imagine.
We are. We're getting closer and closer. We just got our Amazon Advanced Partner status, which we're pretty excited about. It means that we're in the top 5% of agencies for brands. So we're really happy about that. We're excited to keep scaling the advertising. We're up 146% on advertising spend over the past year for our clients. So lots of good things happening with the agency right now.
Let's start off, because there may be some agency owners listening to this. When you started out in 2015, what service did you offer? And just take me through a little bit of the evolution of how you iterated throughout. What did you start off with in 2015? What was the service?
Well, at that time, the Amazon platform was completely different. The level of competitiveness just really didn't exist. Where we really started is similar to what we're doing today. It's just evolved into a more advanced form. The full management of the Amazon channel. Again, at the time, it was really from an agency standpoint, it was really a blue ocean. There really weren't many competitors out there working with these brands. And you mentioned some of the products I sold. One of them was art supplies. And we were competing against brands like Crayola and beating brands like Crayola on the Amazon platform. And that's when we realized that there was really an opportunity to do this. So from there, we started focusing on how do we take our knowledge of positioning products on the Amazon platform and apply that to other brands. So that's kind of how it started. We started working with some pretty large brands because, again, there really were no other agencies out there at the time. And we just, again, handled everything from getting their products on the platform, making sure that the merchandising aspects of how the products looked on the platform were correct, all the content aspects, the advertising management, and really helped them scale. I remember the first time that we took them through a Q4 in a Prime Day, and the results were insane. Like, the clients never expected to see that much in sales because they didn't know what they were doing wrong on the platform. So once we put in the right processes for them, they really started to grow faster. And that was probably the most exciting point from exciting thing from our standpoint.
Talk about some of the mistakes companies make with Prime Day.
Well, again, it really depends on what the client goals are. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. I mean, people are looking for deals on Prime Day. They're not going to be the most loyal customers. They're not coming back for repeat purchases. We work with a lot of brands that are in the consumable category. So we're constantly thinking about customer acquisition costs and customer lifetime value. How do we position our clients to get the best results and get the best outcomes in the long term for them? And Prime Day is one of the areas where Amazon really pushes you to give massive, massive discounts. And the reality is that it's not necessary. Depending on, again, it depends on your product, depending on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to turn inventory, there may be reasons why you want to do it. But the main thing you can do as a brand is you can still take advantage of all the traffic coming to the platform. I mean, the traffic on Prime Day surges on Amazon, and by just positioning your advertising in the right place, by having some type of offer to make them feel like they're getting a deal, doesn't need to be like the 40-50% that Amazon asks you, but like 10-20% is enough to capture a lot more of that traffic without putting yourself into the red from a financial standpoint, or putting yourself in a position where you're burning through inventory that you don't have enough cash to continue on beyond that. We've seen that happen before, where people give away too much inventory or give away too much of a discount. They turn the inventory, they get the cash back in, but it's not enough to reinvest in their continued growth for the future.
I've seen interesting, I feel like, evolution of sellers, which is they start off kind of with arbitrage, then they do private label, and then the advanced ones start a software or an agency because they've gotten so good at it. Does that sound? Was the art supplies? Was that your own brand, or was that where you started off with just buying other things and selling them?
That was our own brand. So actually, the journey you just detailed was pretty close to what we actually did. The first thing I started with in e-commerce in general was selling ebooks on Kindle. That was the first one. That was the easiest one to do. From there, it turned into, we learned that we could sell products on Amazon. We were like, wow, this is crazy. So then it got into retail arbitrage.
What were you doing at that time? You were going to stores and buying stuff up?
Yeah, that's what we were doing. On the weekends, I'm originally from Connecticut, so on the weekends we were driving everywhere between Fairfield County, Westchester County, Bergen County, everything in northern New Jersey, southern New York, trying to buy everything we could that was on clearance and then reselling it. I remember still the first product we sold was a internet router, a Wi-Fi router, and we bought it for like $20 on clearance, and it was selling on Amazon for like $80. So we were like, wow, this is awesome. Like,
Buy
this
as
is
many
crazy.
of those as possible.
Exactly. We literally would buy all of the inventory we could. I still have photos of, you know, carts full of video games and whatever we could find.
There's a risk though, I guess, right? You're fronting the cash for these things.
Exactly. That is the risk. And it's essentially unavoidable. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. It's a long game though. It's essentially thinking that no matter what, from all of these different types of product I have, I'm going to eventually make money from it, or I'm eventually going to get the cash back at least. And that's the way that most, I think, retail arbitrageurs play it. It's like, how can I get a catalog with as many products as possible to give me the most potential to sell them? But you're right. There's a big sunk cost there when you're buying up the inventory to begin with. But
what stage of life are you in there? Is this college, after college?
This was after college. So at the time, I was working as a real estate developer for Sears, which kind of sounds irrelevant, but especially to the marketing world. But it was an interesting look into what was happening within retail, and I think that's kind of what pushed me more towards getting into e-commerce. We were closing mall stores, we were selling off malls, like lots of assets that Sears had were no longer profitable. And some of the buyers in some instances were Amazon or FedEx, and they were turning malls or stores into distribution centers. And that kind of opened up my eyes to like, what's going on here? Like, how is this happening? And then from there, it just kind of became diving into the platform to keep learning more and more what was available. And we talked about retail arbitrage. Beyond that, I was building a private label. All of these things were things I had no idea were possible until at least I started seeing what was happening in the real estate space or in the retail space. Kind of woke me up to what was happening in the e-commerce world.
What mistakes do you feel you made? So, after the arbitrage, you started your own brands. Mm-hmm. What were some of the mistakes you made with your own brands and private label? Because you had the art supplies, you had umbrellas, and probably others. What were some of those things you wish you would have known then?
I would say that it's not so much that things that I wish I would have known. It's that there are certain things that I understand are a big weakness for me. And one of those is inventory buying. I am very bad at sourcing products. I'm not very good at making sure that I have enough inventory. We had products and making sure that I'm doing all the compliance as well with that. So some of the issues we ran into were we bought a bunch of colored pencils. We didn't know there's a massive tariff on colored pencils from China. So essentially we had to be twice the price of Crayola. We couldn't compete with them on that category. We struggled with manufacturing for one of our best selling products, which was they're called brush pens. They're essentially dual tip markers. And that actually ended up to a Chinese competitor coming in and essentially killing the market for us. We sourced flippers and diving masks for another brand that we had, and those didn't sell at all. So like that was an entire category that we got wrong, and the costs were so much because the product was so big. We were using Amazon's fulfillment, so the FBA fees were so expensive because the product size was so big, and that was another thing that we didn't consider ahead of time. So I would say we kind of rushed into it, trying to figure out how to do this, how to take advantage of the trend, how to find categories, sell products. And we made a good amount of money, but I think the biggest thing we struggled with was making sure that we had enough inventory, that we were working with trustworthy suppliers, and that we knew what we were doing when it came to the import and logistics side.
One of the most successful ones was the umbrellas?
Yeah, the brush pens and the umbrellas sold really well. Umbrellas were a competitive category, but we had a good supplier. We had a good price point on it. And every day it rained, essentially the sales went crazy. It was awesome. So like we would be watching a normal day, probably sell like 10, 15 units. Big rainstorm comes, 100, 150 units a day. And we were like, this is phenomenal. Like, this is amazing. And the brush pens, that was the other one. That was the first one that really hit it off. With the brush pens, we we launched in Q4, so right before Christmas time, and we ended up selling on the first day like 35 units, and we were like, whoa, like, this is the first time selling any products that's not retail arbitrage, our own brand. And we were like, whoa, we were not expecting that. And then from there it kind of kept going. And we ran out of inventory fast. Within like 2 months we were out of inventory, and we were like, damn, we need to rebuy, we need to figure out how to get more units. And that's really where the challenges with that kind of started. We kept that brand going for about a little more than a year, but at a certain point we were getting so much competition coming in from China with the same products, sellers knocking off our products, knocking off our brand, from things we weren't considering at all beforehand, that we were kind of like, all right, well, maybe we need to shift focus here and try to figure out something else.
What do you think right now is an untapped, like if you were to go in and start a product now, what would you, I could tell you've thought about this. What would you do now?
I have a product in development, which I'm not
going to talk
about right now. But in general, I'm a big fan of, especially with Amazon. And again, I mentioned this earlier on the brands we work with. I'm a very big fan of consumable products because if you have a good product, if you have a good customer experience, the customer is more than likely going to come back. When you can measure the customer lifetime value, you can figure out what your cost of acquisition is. The initial acquisition can be a little bit more expensive. Maybe you don't make money on the first sale, but you make money in the long term. So there's a lot of advantages to working in the consumable category, especially because advertising on Amazon is continuing to get more expensive. We work with a lot of supplement brands. That's probably one of the most competitive categories on Amazon. And, protein click cost per clicks are $25. So if you're selling, the protein sells $70, $80, but still, if you're not converting at 33% on that initial acquisition, you're burning through cash. So you need to make sure that the lifetime value of repeat consumers coming back to you is going to make up for that initial acquisition cost. And it's a challenge, but when you figure out the right formula for it, it allows your brand to really scale. It's kind of a positive feedback loop in that you're acquiring more and more customers. They're bringing in more and more sales. They're purchasing again. They're leaving more reviews. It's creating more brand awareness, and it continues to go up and up and up. Again, it all comes down to having your customer acquisition channels dialed in. But when you do, it's really a powerful tool.
Mike, what will your product launch look like? Are you going to also launch on like a Shopify as well? Or talk about when you release this, what are all the levers you're going to pull?
There's going to be a lot. We're going to launch on Shopify as well, but it's more for, I guess, spillover from other sources. So when it comes to launching the product, we're going to have the content ready, the SEO ready ahead of time, upload all of that at once, get that going. We'll be launching advertising on the Amazon platform, focusing on the main keywords within the listing at the same time. We'll also be launching advertising on Google to try to drive off-platform traffic, as well as working on some content partnerships and PR placements to try to drive traffic from listicles or other websites where I might be able to get links going to Amazon. So there's a lot of different ways that we're going to focus on driving the traffic. I've talked to some other people around other ideas about discounting and things like that. I'm not a huge fan of discounting to get sales. Some people will do it. Some people will, you've probably seen it on Amazon. They'll list a high MSRP and a low sales price. And it's a temporary thing. That stuff's kind of gimmicky. It works to some extent, but in general, I think if you just get enough traffic to the listing and you have a good enough product, it looks good enough, the consumer that you're reaching wants it, you're going to be successful when you go to launch the product.
I know, I'm sure the Amazon algorithm is always changing, and like sales velocity with the, like you said, the conversion rate, how frequently someone's buying, reviews. What's your strategy that you recommend your clients as far as the reviews go?
Yeah. So with reviews, it's always a challenge. There's a lot of questions that come up around what you can and can't do. And essentially, terms of service lays it out pretty clearly. You shouldn't give out incentivized reviews. So from that standpoint, a lot of, maybe you've purchased things on Amazon, Jeremy, where you get the card inside and it's like, oh, save 50%, or here's a $50 coupon or a free product. All of these things are completely against terms of service. And When I look at it from a brand management perspective, as an owner, I mean, I guess you're willing to take a little bit more risk, but as I look at it from a brand management perspective, if you screw up on Amazon's terms of service and they kick you off the platform, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to reach people? Amazon is where everyone's going to search for products. And if your products can't be there, then you're essentially, chopping off your hand, essentially when trying to reach new people. So I think that's like the biggest thing when it comes to reviews. I in general, the way I try to explain to customers how to get more reviews, it's just to have a great customer experience. You can consider including inserts that do not offer an incentive for them to leave a review, but I've seen this with a few. We're a small family business, blah blah blah. Like, leave us a review. That works for some people. The other way is obviously we can request reviews. Amazon will send out the emails through the back end of through the back end of the Seller Central platform to the customers that are actually purchasing it. And I think one of the newer, unique ways, and I personally haven't tested this, is the manage your customer experience section of the Seller Central platform. Amazon a few years ago created the ability for brands for buyers to follow sellers and brands on the Amazon platform. Manage your customer experience is a way for you to stay in contact with these sellers by email. So there may be some ways for you to leverage that to potentially drive more reviews to the platform, to your listings. So
there's a lot of, software out there and stuff like that helps manage those things. I love to hear your recommendations. Like if someone's going to send an email through Amazon, I don't know, there's probably 20, who knows how many, 100 softwares that help link up with Amazon to do that. I'd love to hear what are your go-to partners and software that you like?
Yeah, so we have a couple of partners that we work with, pretty closely. For that type of, review requesting, we work with ZonGuru. ZonGuru, we integrate with all of our client accounts. We use a lot of the analytics, the tracking, the research aspects of it, the copywriting aspects to help our clients get the best results there. And then our other big partner is IntentWise on the advertising side. We use the platform a lot for the reporting aspects and the in-depth metrics they provide. When it comes to the actual advertising automation, we don't tend to use that, but we use the recommendations as well and some other aspects of it. So those are probably the partners we work with closely. We also use Helium 10 for some keyword tracking aspects. We just recently found a new company that sounds pretty interesting to us called Jungle Ace. It's essentially a split testing platform through your advertising. So we're going to start exploring that a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, between those, 2-3 softwares that I mentioned, we're really able to manage everything that we need to on the Amazon platform.
We talked about the evolution of services and started off, with kind of a full management of the brand on Amazon. Obviously, you've gotten more sophisticated as the platform's got more sophisticated as well. Mm-hmm. But we did mention the e-commerce enablement in Latin America, or is it just in Mexico? Can you talk about that program and why, again, I'm always curious on when you launch a new service, it's great, but it also takes away focus on the current service. So talk about why you decided to launch that.
So I haven't had a chance to mention this yet, I don't think, but I live in Guadalajara, Mexico. I've been here for about 6 years. My wife is from here. That's part of the reason I'm down here. And it's kind of an interesting experience for me because I'm mainly dealing with sellers and brands in the US and seeing what the customer experience is like for people in the US and what I compare that to the customer experience in Mexico or in other markets in Latin America. It is horrible. The prices are higher. If you want to bring products in, they have to be imported from the US in a lot of instances. There's a lot of hidden fees. For example, when I buy electronics from the US, I have to pay tariffs that are not reflected in the purchase price. They are added at the end when Amazon goes to checkout. So in general, the concept behind it was, all right, well, consumers in Mexico don't have access to the same brands that we have in the US. A lot of brands can't come into Mexico because of different challenges of having a business, having a partner, blah, blah, blah. The consumers are paying more for products here than they would be paying in the US. And essentially it came down to the point of like, how can we increase the customer experience by getting brands into Mexico? And when we say we're doing e-commerce enablement, that's essentially what we're doing. You have a brand that wants to get into Latin America. We help you handle all the logistics, all the compliance, any approvals, your brand registration, and we actually handle the distribution as well. So we'll manage all of your e-commerce channels for you, as well as try to get you into retail. From our standpoint, we think this is going to be massively valuable to brands that are looking to break into new markets, especially as in the US dollar is getting weaker relative to other currencies in the world. As an example, the Mexican peso has strengthened almost 30% over the past 3 years, which is crazy when you think about it. So being able to earn in other currencies, I think, is going to continue to be more important for a lot of these brands in the long term. We focus mainly on Mexico right now, but we do have a roadmap of getting into Colombia and Brazil. Those are the 3 largest e-commerce markets in Latin America. Mexico with about 20% of the e-commerce share, Brazil with about 50%, and Colombia with a little bit less than 10%. So between 3 countries, you can hit most of the e-commerce market in Latin America.
80-20.
Yeah, exactly. So like, why focus on anything else when you can get to the place where most consumers are purchasing products? I mean, you can get into smaller markets like Argentina, Chile, I guess Colombia, or Bolivia if you want to. But there's really no return on all the investment there. It's better off to just focus on those 3 markets.
Talk about ideal companies for you. Who are ideal companies for you to work with in this program? And I want to give a shout out to Perry Marshall. I did an interview with Perry. He wrote 80-20 sales and marketing. So Mike just said, the whole book is on 80-20 your sales and marketing. And it's a great book, great interview. So check that out. Ideal companies. Who should be contacting you about this?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially anyone looking to get in there. But when, from a competitive standpoint, we work pretty closely with Mercado Libre. We have a really good partnership with them, and they have essentially brought us on to try to bring more brands into Latin America. And because of that, we get to see some unique insights into the platform on where they have needs for categories. And the largest categories, and this is not just in Mexico, this is in all of Latin America, from a product gap standpoint, are electronics, supplements, and cosmetics. All of those have unique challenges. Electronics mainly are made in China. Most countries in Latin America have tariffs against China or bans on Chinese products coming into their country, which is one of the obstacles for an electronics brand. And then supplements and cosmetics are both products that are regulated by essentially the FDA. It's called COFEPRIS here in Mexico. It has other names in other countries. And you need the approvals with those regulators to be able to bring the products in and be able to sell them. Right now, brands are able to get through some loopholes by sending products from the US. But again, when we talk about customer experience, customer your relationship, customer loyalty, and even legality of some of these aspects. I mean, it's not legal to bring in a supplement from another country that's not approved in that country. There's some big loopholes that Amazon and Mercado Libre is letting brands take advantage of right now that I don't think will be there forever. So I think the important thing is for the brands to start doing things the correct way, and that's exactly what we're trying to help them navigate.
Do those brands, let's take supplements and cosmetics, do they have to be, for you to work with them, do you want them selling at a certain volume already on the main platform? What point do they have to be at for that?
Typically, we need people that are doing over $1 million a year in the US. In general, like I said, there's a pretty big depth of products in Mexico. So you may not be the most well-known brand in the US, but even having any brand recognition in the US might be enough for you to be successful in Latin America. And I think that's the biggest thing about the opportunity is like you can come in as essentially a disruptor brand into Latin America and take a larger market share than a more established brand in the US will have, because they're not doing things the right way. So that's about the size company we need to see, about doing $1 million or more a year on Amazon. It's kind of our ICP across the agency side and the e-commerce enablement side, because we believe at that point you have the money to start investing in advertising, to start growing, to start capturing more customers. And that's really going to give you a moat and a head start on any other brands that come into the marketplace after.
So companies in electronics, supplements, cosmetics, they're doing over $1 million in the US Amazon. They should, if they want to expand into Mexico, they should give you a ring.
Definitely. And some other good categories are toys and pet products as well. Baby products is another one, actually. Everyone has a pet down here. And the access to pet supplies like there are in the US on Amazon, that's another very competitive market. It's completely different down here. When we talk about competitiveness, we're looking at cost per clicks that are 1/10 of what we see in the US. So when you think about that, your ability to acquire customers at a lower cost, to get a longer lifetime value out of them, or a more profitable lifetime value out of them, it's pretty incredible right now.
Like, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of building a company in Latin America for you?
I mean, I think the main advantage that most people think of is the cost of human capital. It's obviously less expensive to hire people in Latin America than it is in the US, or even in Europe and some other marketplaces. But I think the other great benefit is the access to talent here. We're able to hire MBAs. We're able to hire executives with 10 plus years of experience in certain areas for half of the cost of what I would be paying in the US. These are people that have worked at multinational companies before, that are familiar with how things work in the US or in other countries. So they already have a level of experience that's very desirable for what we need and what we're trying to achieve. Another great benefit, especially about Mexico, is the similarities between cultures. When we think about it, about 40% about 40 million Spanish speakers in the US are Mexican. And a lot of those Mexicans they're born there, or they go to the US for a while, they get used to the US culture, and then they end up coming back to Mexico. So the same desires for the things that they had have transformed the Mexican culture as well, when it comes to shopping, when it comes to buying and consumer habits. I think that's another great benefit about Mexico, is because the culturally we're very similar. And I think that's something that is discounted a lot because of the language difference. Which is something that we just need to get more familiar with as Americans in the US. On the downside, I would say that the main challenges, and we don't have this challenge because we have an office, but if you're going to have remote workers, infrastructure is sometimes a challenge with having reliable Wi-Fi or reliable power, depending on where they are. Mexico is a country that has less of an issue with that, but we've worked with employees in Costa Rica, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and other places, and that has been more of an issue. So that's the one thing to consider. And then I would say the other thing is just, like I said, culturally, it's good in some ways, but there's also some challenges that you need to adapt to as well. Expectations on how to work, expectations on how to communicate. Those are things where that usually are lacking or not on the same level as the US. But again, it really comes down to the people you're hiring and the candidates you're recruiting.
What's the office policy of people coming in to the office? And did that change during COVID or after?
So, fortunately, here in Mexico, the majority of our employees are in cities. They're in Mexico City or Guadalajara or Monterrey. So we don't have to worry about the infrastructure issues as much.
So they can work remotely and be fine.
Yeah, they can work remotely and be fine. Pre-COVID, we had a 15-person office space, and we actually renewed the lease on something like February 15th, 2020, and then a week later, COVID hit, and the office was shut for 12 months. So essentially, at that point, we were like, you know what? If you need a place to work, we'll get you a co-working space. If not, you're fine at home. We have a co-working space here. That's where I'm recording from. And we have 7 or 8 employees that come in a couple days a week. So with us, we're pretty flexible on it. We have some employees in other areas where the infrastructure is not as reliable. Merida in the Yucatan, the infrastructure is not as great. So he goes into a co-working space every day to work from. So we're pretty flexible with things. It really depends on each employee's work situation.
So, Mike, let's say someone's listening to this. They're like, this sounds great. I want an MBA with 10 years experience in Latin America. Where would you suggest people go to find great talent in Latin America?
I would say it depends a lot on your space. So, I mean, when we look at, and I know this can be taken different ways, but when we look at like the types of companies or where to find talent specifically, Guadalajara is known as the Silicon Valley of Mexico. So if you want dev talent, you want, I don't know, coders, whatever, this is the place to come look for it in Mexico, at least. I mean, there's a lot of talent in Mexico City as well. There's just so many people there, but this is what Guadalajara is known for. Monterrey, for example, is known for logistics. It's known for manufacturing. So if you're looking for employees that have experience with those, that's a great area to go as well. Mexico is very segmented in that way, and that there's certain industries that are in certain cities, which is interesting that you can access talent. When it comes to actually hiring this talent or figuring out how you're going to acquire them, there's a bunch of different agencies that have come up from a hiring standpoint, and their fees are pretty reasonable, somewhere between 15 to 20% of the annual salary. And for example, like annual salary is probably less than 50,000. So you're looking at a cost that's somewhere in the range of 10,000 or less to get an employee from the hiring standpoint. So it's not a bad cost. Again, you can go further south. You can find other markets, other countries for recruiting talent. There's a lot of remote workers out of Colombia. There's also a lot out of Argentina right now. Argentina is an interesting market because the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar is the only country in Latin America where the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar is getting stronger. Every other country, the purchasing power is getting weaker. So from an employee standpoint, we have some employees in Argentina who really love that fact that they get paid in US dollars. The inflation is insane in Argentina. So again, it really depends what you need, where you're comfortable looking. Time zones are also a thing to consider. It doesn't seem like it, but I think Argentina is like 3 hours ahead of East Coast time. Brazil, we have some employees in Brazil, same thing, 2 or 3 hours ahead of East Coast time. Luckily, Mexico is convenient because everything is pretty much either central or mountain time, with Tijuana being really the only area that's on Pacific time. So lots of good things to consider when you're looking at hiring in Latin America. It's really just coming down to where you want to hire people, what skill set you're looking for, and then working with the companies that can help you find the talent.
So you recommend just finding one of the agencies. Actually, there was an interview I did with Condor Agency. They actually help source talent out of Latin America. So people can check that out. Maybe Mike, that may be another resource for you as you're hiring more. They're good people over there. So you can check out the interview I did with Condor Agency. So from a hiring perspective, you guys have evolved. You have a couple partners and you have over 60 staff. What were some of the key hires you put in place because an agency business is a lot different than an Amazon business. So what were some of those key positions that you put in place throughout the years?
Yeah, I think that in itself is a very interesting question because that gets to the root of how the business evolves over time. And as you grow an agency, it's very important to take it from the standpoint of being founder-led to being employee-led. And that is not an easy transition for many people. I think one of the first key hires we made was she's currently our head of account management, our director of account management. She had experience in customer success and a lot of other areas, and we started putting her in charge there. She started having the other account managers reporting to her. That was probably the first key hire that we made because we were able to start standardizing the product or the service that we were providing to a lot of our clients. The second key hire we made from there would probably be our advertising manager. He helped us build out the actual ad teams to make sure that we were, again, delivering a consistent product because, like I said, that is the hardest challenge from going from a founder-led company to an employee-led company is consistency in what you're actually delivering to the clients. Because if there's a noticeable drop-off, there's going to be some clients that are extremely happy, other clients that are extremely pissed, and it's going to be a never-ending circle of trying to cut that off. Beyond that, some of the more
at what point in your history of the company do you hire someone for director of account management? Like,
so she's been in that role for about 2 years now. We just got to the point where it was too difficult for us to manage on our own. At that point, I think we had probably 40 clients, 45 clients, and we had I have two partners. One partner was focused completely on sales. One partner was focused completely on, content production, which was another important role that we hired down the road. And I was kind of focused in between marketing, finance, some aspects of operations, dealing with account services and strategy. And it kind of just became unmanageable. It was like, I need to start figuring out where my interests are or where my strengths are going forward and start hiring for the roles that, I can't handle. One of the roles that I think I was okay at, but it was something I did not enjoy, was the account management, the constant client communication, constant responses. So we brought in someone that had really good experience in that. She had worked with over 100 clients at the agency she was at before. She was very comfortable dealing with customers, dealing with communication with customers. And that was kind of the first way. We started looking at what we were doing right now, what we enjoy doing, what we don't enjoy doing, and then figuring out trying to identify the people that we can bring in to help handle the aspects of the things that we don't like.
Yeah. I'd love to hear other positions you put in place. Actually, my partner and I, John, we have what we call an intervention meeting once a week where we more on my intervention. And he talks about, here's what you're doing. Here's what you should not be doing. You should stop doing this. Something like intervention, and we need to get this off your plate. So,
yes,
because I'm like, oh, I like doing that. It's fine. And he's like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. So it's kind of my intervention. I have a weekly intervention meeting on myself. So I get what you're saying.
We've focused a lot. And again, talking about the evolution of the agency, we've kind of gotten to the point where instead of selling a full management service, we're selling specific, in a way we call them packages or SOPs on how to make these brands as successful as possible. For as long as they work with us, they're going to be successful. If they choose to go somewhere else, they can still follow these and continue to be successful. And I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but I have a lot of experience on the actual deliverables that we were doing. And I was getting a little bit more involved in the actual planning and development of these packages. And recently, I've kind of stepped back from that. I've stepped into more leading the company, making sure everyone's on the right track, making sure the planning's in place, the strategic aspects are in place, and I've let other people handle those. And a lot of the feedback I've gotten lately from the people running them is like, everything is so much smoother without you in it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's good to know. I guess it forces people
to the ego, sort of, but yeah,
a little bit, but I understand it as well.
It means you put good team members in place, really.
Exactly. I have good team members. It means that I was probably holding people back from stepping up because I was doing so much for them. And it's giving people more of the desire to take on more, to grow, to push themselves. And I think those are the really important aspects as a leader that you need to be able to hit. If you can't inspire people to do their best or to grow, you're going to have employee churn. You're going to have unhappy employees. That's going to lead to unhappy customers. So it kind of all, trickles down when the founders get involved too much. As you keep growing, you got to keep putting employees and responsibility on these employees to get things done.
What would you say, it is your baby, right? It's your baby. So it's sometimes hard to step away and not touch it. How did you do it? What was your advice to someone else who's like, yeah, I'm having a hard time letting go of these things. And I know I need to, or I have team members I need to just hand it off to, or people at least in my mind, think, oh, I'm good at that. I can do it easily. I like it, but it's stuff I should not be doing.
Yeah.
How did you actually detach from that?
It was a challenge, I would say. Honestly, the thing that made the biggest difference was starting to work with mentors and business coaches. We worked with a really, really excellent business coach who helped us a lot on the operational side. Start to think about things differently. I mean, none of us had true operations experience. I was in real estate development. My partner was in project management. Another one was in sales. So it was an area where we were kind of lacking knowledge. And working with a coach to help us develop that knowledge is where we kind of started making those changes. So then we realized, all right, we can take things to a certain point, and now we need an operations specialist who knows what he's doing to kind of take it to the next level, or advertising specialist, whatever it was. And I think that's where we started getting more comfortable giving up control, is when we had the advice from someone that had been there before, or someone that had done this before and knew how we should try to set it up. Doesn't mean you're going to have 100% success. A lot of that comes down to the way you're doing things and the people you're hiring. But when you have kind of that reassurance that you're on the right track, or someone to hold you accountable and kind of bounce ideas off of, that's really where you can start growing a lot faster, because we don't, this is one of my favorite sayings, is we don't know what we don't know. It kind of comes from, what's his name? Nassim Taleb, Black Swan. There's always things that we don't know. And when we accept that we don't know things is when we can start like leaning into it and growing more. And a lot of that comes down to getting the knowledge from other sources. And one way to do that is working with a coach or a business mentor.
Mike, I have one last question. First of all, I want to point people to amzadvisers.com to learn more about what they're doing. Last question is mentors who have been impactful for you, mentors, colleagues throughout the years.
There's definitely a few. I would say when I was, still kind of starting to get into the hiring phase, I have a good friend, Mike. He also is a foreigner who lives here in Mexico, lives in Mexico City, Mike Roby. He helped me start looking at things differently. And his background is in finance as well. He has his own hedge fund. So he kind of, cuts through all the nonsense and gets right to the root cause of things, which is super helpful on changing perspective on things. The business coach we worked with was Brian Smith. He was super helpful, again, on the operations side and kind of getting us to understand where our weaknesses were and what positions we need to help the company grow and how to position ourselves differently. I think that was another very important thing that he helped with. And yeah, I would say those are probably the two mentors that have had the biggest impact on the business. We've worked with a lot of other people, but when I look back and think of where we were as a business to what their help and advice got us to, it really helped us break through plateaus. And I think that was the most important thing.
Mike, I want to be the first one to thank you. Check out more episodes of the podcast. Check out amzadvisers.com to learn more. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Jeremy. It was great speaking with you today.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.